Golf fans, what is going on? I'm your host RP, and this is another episode of Podcast in Regulation, first of the year. Today is Tuesday, January 21st. Missed the first two tournaments, but I kind of like where the Farmers kind of takes off, and for me, feels like the kickoff of a new season. Last year kind of fell flat with my coverage of a lot of tournaments past September, so definitely missed out on about 3 months. There were some good tournaments, some great wins in there, and always a good storyline to read about. But just as usual, with this being a one-man show, life, time, work all get away from me, and it's really hard to squeeze in the time to not just record, but to edit, to get my research in. It's one thing for me that I've been making the last few years, putting in your own research, time and effort to make an informed decision on which way you're betting and which way you're putting your money. But to sit down and get all this done, I don't know, looking at trying to find consistency still. I've mentioned that before, but I'm glad you're here. As always, you could reach out on the email at podcastinregulation@gmail.com. Twitter and Instagram are at podinregulation, and there's always the Facebook fan page, Podcast in Regulation. You will find that the posts and the published episodes will be extended a little further. I decided to add the YouTube channel. It won't be a simulcast. It will be this same exact episode, but just accessible through that. I know there have been a couple requests, and I wasn't necessarily resistant, but it was just another platform where I would have to upload and take the time and effort to put this on. Even though as much as I love doing it, it certainly doesn't pay the bills. So I had to take a back seat. Maybe this time around it'll work itself out in terms of the time and my availability, but I still love doing this. We have some episodes to recap from the end of last year that I ended on a high note if you had been keeping track. I hadn't put the 4 episodes out, but at the very least, as always, you can find it on Instagram and you can find it on X, formerly Twitter, every week with where I'm putting my money. And last year was positive. We made some. Remember, the bankroll started at $1,000. We worked our way up to $1,289.33. And that was a lot of bets, too. Overall record last year was 116 and 272. So we're not going to pick up the record where we left off. We're going to start a brand new year, brand new record, just like I did last year, following the first season that I put this up in, 2023. So we'll start from scratch, but the bankroll remains the same. We'll kind of keep it that way just so that the record doesn't look so horrible. But as always, that's not the emphasis. It's more the bottom line. I think that number is just going to grow to something huge, and I'm going to lose track of it somewhere. So we're just going to start out with being undefeated, and we got some picks in this week for the Farmers. Got top 40s, top 30s, top 20s, 10s, and 5s. I don't think I'm going to pick any winners for this tournament. Just kind of throw that broad net out there and see what I can get in return. Alright, and as we move into this new year, just before I get into the nitty-gritty of my analysis and who I've taken for my one and done, as well as all my bets this week, wanted to recap 4 episodes that I didn't publish last year, starting on Wednesday, August 21st. I'm not going to go through every single pick. You can actually go back through any of the streams or any of the Facebook fan pages and see all these picks week to week. Took a beating the last 3 of 4, but on the final week definitely cashed out something good to get me back on track to start this bankroll for this year. But overall, the Wednesday, August 21st episode, I was going into it with a 105 and 235 record, along with a bankroll of $1,425.86. I'm not going to highlight each one. I'll probably just do the last one, mainly because it was just a really good way of ending on a high note. Quite frankly, didn't know that was going to be the last episode that I would be able to publish or put out in terms of picks. I did continue to make wagers throughout the rest of the year. The only difference was I was going to keep that bankroll separate for this. I'm going to always be able to show some sort of transparency with what I'm putting out there. So anything I win or lose, you can document it and you can kind of look at it for yourself. Anyway, that first week of the last 4, I had $176.45 on the table. Ended up losing $136.05 of that. So a little bit of a dip in the bankroll there. Another dip in the following week. I had $98.15 on the table. Total loss ended up being $33.81. So kept about a third of what I had out there in terms of all the feelers and all the wagers that I put out. And then the third week that I didn't get published, there was $82.05 on the table. The total loss from that was $36.67. Now here's where it just ended up doing really well for me. Overall was the final one. Week 4 that I did not publish, I went 6-6, nothing spectacular, nothing to write home about. And I ended the year with a record of 116-272. On the table for the final week was $132.25. Actually, $170 total. So payout was $202.25, and the biggest part of that was not the BMW. It was the Kroger Queen City, where I had chosen 4 players to finish in the top 5, and 4 of them actually did. So it worked out really well there for me. So that's how I came to the final and the beginning of this year's bankroll to be $1,289.33. So that's where we are. For anyone who hasn't, just kind of talking to the YouTube following, whatever there is now, you can look at my past lineups, whether it was one and done, and all of my picks that week, and kind of start from there and see how I got to that number. The very first start of this, 2 years ago, 2 years ago was 1,000. So the goal really is to roll this thing up and see how far we can get. Feel like it's a good, comfortable number. You can take some chances and not feel like I have to reload on any level. And you'll see me continue to bet with that throughout the course of the season. All right, so on to the farmers. First 3 winners of the year were Hideki, Nick Taylor, and Sepp Straka, so congrats to them this week. Hideki is also on my list for faves and fades. We'll start with the faves. I will always mention that I won't necessarily bet on these guys specifically in any sort of 4-ball, 6-shooter, or anything like that, but they could very well make my one and done list and or any sort of DFS that I may be participating in this week. So Hideki Matsuyama, Ludwig Oberg, Keegan Bradley, Shane Lowry, and then we start to get into some of the deeper cuts. Victor Perez, Bo Hostler, Will Zalatoris, who not so much of a deep cut, but I haven't fully bought into him yet. I think he's well on his way. I just don't know where I would take the chance yet to be on the right side. I may, in the words of a guy like Rick Rungood, be a little late on the upswing rather than just trying to be early. Steven Yeager, he had a great year last year. He had a great year for me, at least, I should say. But not too shabby for himself. He will probably stay on my radar until it looks like he forgot how to swing a golf club. Kevin Yu and Alex Smalley. And a name that you might know from last week from Nothing Good, William Mao. Now, with William Mao, I wouldn't have given this a second thought, but there have been a couple people who have pointed out that he came back really well on the following day after posting that 81 and that 13 he had on round 2. So I love the idea that he had such a short-term memory. He was able to come out, didn't withdraw, didn't do anything other than come out and play well again. Round 1 was good to him. Round 2 was an absolute disaster, but mainly just from that one hole. And then came back and played well again in round 3. So I'm very okay with looking at him as just kind of a dark horse top 40. And if you're looking at him on DFS lineups, he may be on the cheaper side. I haven't fully done a deep dive with his value and where people are seeing him there, because he did score points. I believe the last round was a 67 before or after the 81. Yeah, so looking at it, he shot a 68 in round 1. So looked like a hiccup. I would like to think that, for a golfer's sake and their mental side of the game, that was just a one-off. It was a really bad hole, but if you were to take just those 2 really good days, I know it's more than that. I know it's being consistent for that amount of time. Knowing that he hasn't played much, and this is our first really good look at him. I am going to take a flyer on him, probably in the top 40 bet, like I had mentioned. And then on to the fades. A lot of different reasons for some of these bigger names that are in here. I think a lot of people are high on Seyth Theegala, and rightfully so. If you look at his history, you look at his current play, it's not too bad. And considering that there were some names that dropped out between last week and this week, probably bumped him up a little bit in the rankings. Scotty and Xander last week. This week, Xander's still out. It is an undisclosed medical. I don't know if it's an injury or some sort of sickness. Probably has something to do with the end of last year and what he had disclosed there, but who knows what that is. And then now Colin Morikawa has withdrawn due to illness. So going back to Theegala, I just don't know if I am totally bought in for this tournament. Personal reasons / money reasons, I'm just going to stay away from him. The other one that was interesting, and I probably am going to be wrong, but he won't be in any of my lineups, nor will he be in any of my wagers or parlays. Sungjae Im. I love the trend going up to it, but he misses last week, missed the cut last year in this event, and that was, I think, an oddity, mainly because leading up to last year, his previous scores were going in the proper direction. He was finished 52nd, 36th, 32nd, 6th, 4th. And you thought, okay, maybe he's just found a way to really like this course, had it finally suit him, was able to take advantage of how it fits his game, but then he misses the cut. So between last year's miscut and last week's miscut, I'm just going to stay away from him for probably one more week, see if he can get it back on track. I know he's looked pretty good, but again, with so many other names out there to take flyers on, I'd rather be able to put a little bit less of the money on some of the longer shots to just get into, I guess, positions that are a little more desirable from my perspective and where to put my money. But I couldn't decide where Sungjae Im fit. Was he going to be a top 10? Could I bet on him for being a missed cut, or do I just want to play it safe at top 40? But that top 40 bet is not enough for me to at least justify putting that much money on him versus some of the other guys you'll hear later, who I've at least decided on. Jason Day, another up and down one. He's won here twice, but at the same time, I feel like his game is finally pivoted, or is sitting on the fence, kind of teetering in either direction. He could place top 10 any given week, but he also could potentially end up being top 40. So it's going to be one of those where I don't know if or when I'd even take him for a one and done in some sort of office pool. I'm sure it would at some point where a lot of the big names are kind of changing it out, deciding to change their schedule, maybe coming off a win and dropping out of a tournament. But Day, for me personally, is somebody that I'll keep him in mind, especially if it's daily fantasy. But trying to pick him to win, or even trying to pick his positioning, it was a nightmare for me last year. So I think I might just stay away from it again this season. He'll probably show up every once in a while, like I had mentioned, but not very many times in my book. Also fading Max Grazerman. I know he's playing well. I liked him last year in several spots. I'm just not going to take him at the value he is right now. He's moved up a little bit in the cost and the salary in DFS, and some of the odds I feel like they're giving him for even just the top 30 are not worth the squeeze for me, so I'm leaving him off. Ben Griffin, another one kind of in that same realm. As for everyone else, I'm pretty much going to stick to that. Let's get into a little bit of what they're looking at here at Torrey Pines, with several groups going out throughout the day, and each one getting to experience a different one on Wednesday and then a different one on Thursday. All right, so we all know it's Torrey Pines week. As always, this is a course that could just make or break you. It is difficult, but we do have 11 of the top 30 of the OWGR participating. So those players, you generally can lean on them, but how much success you'll have overall, that's going to be another story. Looking at this thing tipping out at 7,700 yards, almost 78. And previous winners kind of being around that 13, 15 under. The biggest part of this is there are some penalties, but nothing you can't get around being a pro here. It's a third narrowest of fairways on tour, and strokes gained off the tee, 8th toughest. So long hitters who are accurate, that's advantage anywhere and everywhere. But a long ball hitter can definitely still come away with birdie or at least scramble for half decent easy par when you're already out driving most of the field. The bigger part of this is a number that I came across that I don't think for the pros is too big of a problem. The accuracy is always a big one, but 73% of approaches last year were over 150 yards. All right, not too bad. But what got me was half of the 73% of those approach shots were over 200. Do I think that's a huge deal for pros? Not really, but if you aren't as accurate off the tee, it definitely can put you behind in the race. Now, if you're moderate to okay with a good long ball, but you're fantastic with your long irons, and that's what I think is going to be the emphasis this week, it's not going to be a wedge. It's going to be, you're looking at 6, 5s, and 4s coming into some of these greens, and there are going to be advantages, which is why I have marked off and picked some of these guys as fades versus not just touching them at all, which I think there are a few names that people aren't going to be investing in, especially in a one and done, or they would be looking to take some easy money and easy points with a Ludwig Oberg, who I do like, but am I willing to use him as a pick now? Or am I willing to distribute a lot of that money to him in some of these DFS lineups? So those are some of the things I certainly considered when looking at Torrey Pines. Each of them get to see the north and south, so it's going to be a mix of scores. I don't think you'll see too many people scorching one and screwing up the other side of it, but you definitely will see a change in scoring based on where they tee off on Wednesday in comparison to what they finish with on Thursday. So jumping into some of the numbers that I was looking at, if you averaged out the last 9 winners, you're looking at strokes gained off the tee ranking somewhere in the 27th area. If you're looking at approach shots, you're hoping to average somewhere in the 16 range. Around the green, 28th, and putting 18th. But what you'll notice with each winner, as we've gone through each of these years, they've ranked somewhere in the top 5 in one or two of these categories, and maybe not done so well in the other 2. So you got a combination there that you can mix and match. If you're a great driver, great putter, you stand a great chance. If you are approach oriented and that's your forte, as well as good putting, you're good there. And then even when you're looking at strokes gained and approach shots, that can win you that too. I've seen somebody with a stat line of strokes gained off the tee being first, approaches being 4th, but then they kind of fall off on around the green, ranked 38th, and then putting, ranked 37th. So depending on your position, depending on where you can put yourself to at least take advantage of your strong suits, you can have a different type of game for everything here. Another stat that I had seen where it was kind of on the lower end, it was odd. This was 9 years ago. I didn't even mark down who that was, but the player was 55th off the tee. They were 17th in approach, 19th in around the green, and 30th in putting. So I didn't go back to look at what they were facing, if it was weather, if it was just pure luck, and luck is a relative term in golf. But to see those numbers that low was pretty interesting, because then you run into another player. I'm just going to pick one randomly. Yeah, so 3 years ago, you have a player who was 21st off the tee, then 4th in approach, 32nd around the green, but then 8th in putting. So any possible combinations, aside from the one I had mentioned before this player, they work. And as long as you can keep it relatively even for yourself, it looks like you'll always have a place to either approach or make up something on any part of these two courses. That being said, I'm going to drop my top 40 picks right now. These are etched in stone. Again, I haven't drafted anything for daily fantasy. And before I get to the top 40, my one and done pick, you'll see him also in one of these top finishing positions, is Stephan Jaeger. Liked him last year. I liked him at the end of last year. So whether he's turned a corner and become some sort of elite player, I don't know, but I'll tell you this, he's been really consistent anytime I've taken him. So a good way to start the year. If he's a surprise, awesome. I take him now, and I may not get to use him, or I certainly will get to use him towards any part of the other parts of the season. But I will definitely taking him with the utmost confidence coming into the Farmers. So Stephan Jaeger, office pool pick, one and done. Now bets for the top 40, I am taking. That's where I had mentioned William Mao. He's a plus 550 to finish in the top 40. I don't think I see any reason that would scare me away. I actually like the odds in the favor there. Victor Perez at plus 145 and Aaron Rai at minus 115. At minus 115, obviously a little less than even money, but that's a great position to put a good portion of units, a good portion of my bankroll on that, knowing that that'll get a fairly decent return. I say that, and I may have just jinxed it. The top 30, going back to what I had mentioned before, trying to catch Will Zalatoris in an easier spot. He's minus 134. Alex Smalley is a plus 170 to finish top 30. And actually, those are the only two in that category. Then we move on to the top 20. We have Shane Lowry, plus 175. Bo Hostler at plus 230. Stephan Jaeger, the office pick, at plus 210. And then Kevin Yu at plus 280. And then the last three picks, we have two top 10 finishers that I'm guessing would be Keegan Bradley at 300, Tony Finau at plus 275, and Ludwig Åberg. All these picks that I have just mentioned are are positions plus ties. Ludwig Åberg, I am taking outright top 5, no ties, and that was a better odd at plus 220 versus the plus 190. A little bit more of a squeeze there, but I'm very okay with that. I think he'll actually end up in the top 3, and I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that. Alright, so that'll do it for the Farmers. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to next week, where we'll have events running for the PGA, the DP World Tour, and the LPGA side. I really love getting into the deep dive and the numbers of the other two, more so of PGA, only because whenever you want to look up an article, look up numbers, do some sort of analysis for PGA, the info is readily available. It's anywhere you want to look. And I feel like the less coverage they get on DP World Tour side and LPGA, I get a little bit more excited to do a deep dive and trying to find the diamond in the rough, trying to find that sleeper pick, and seeing some of these players grow and find their way, make their way on the PGA Tour through the DP World Tour side. You get to see some of those names like Rikuya Hoshino, Ryu Hasatsune, who's had some pretty good tournaments. You know, they've graduated from that side. They still participate, but you'll see them more and more on the U.S. soil this year with some of the tournaments they're going to be participating in. And of course, LPGA, I've always been a fan. I think it's one of the best covered women's sports, and pretty accessible for the most part. So for me, already loving golf, getting to see these ladies swing and recognizing their faces and being familiar with their games, I've always found enjoyment in that. I think they're fantastic players to begin with. They don't just try to kill the ball. Some can, but they don't they don't rely on that. So between seeing a lot of young players in the European Tour side and just younger rookies in LPGA and seeing some of their progressions as I look at their numbers and as I look at them trending throughout the season, it's pretty awesome. So I definitely have become a fan of golf all around. It's not just of the PGA Tour. And like I said, those storylines are always front and center for when it comes to golf because they are in a bigger spotlight. But I just love hearing the other stories. There's so many good ones out there on any league that you look at. So I'm looking forward to that. But that's the end of the Farmers, and I'm making the decision right now that I probably won't do any sort of DFS. If I change my mind, you'll see it. But as of right now, I think it's just going to stick. I'm just going to stick with the position bets. We haven't done it in a while, so let's go on the clock. As most of you know who have followed this show from the beginning, I am Colorado-based right now, and probably for the longer foreseeable future. I've been here over 20 years, but I am from the DC area, so that means I have been a Tortured fan for a while. When it came to the Commanders, I was a little bit of a Commanders closet fan, mainly because of poor ownership. That's gone, and well, look how far it's come with just that change. 50% turnover in the roster, new organizational heads from Josh Harris to Adam Peters, and everything else that has been solidified in its spot, knowing that this is actually functioning the way a sports team should be. So I've always been a fan. I've been really quiet about it because honestly there hasn't been much to root for, and all of a sudden all that happens, and overnight we're one game away from making an appearance in a Super Bowl. I'll tell you right now, even if our run ends here in Philly, it doesn't taint anything whatsoever. We can get blown out 56-0, and honestly it'll look like we fell flat on our face, but I still haven't bought into why not us. I'm enjoying it, but I'm just honestly enjoying the fact that we are building things the right way, and we are out of such a dark era and such a dark cloud of how mismanaged and how awful the top ranking official of the organization had been for the last 20 something years. Did we get to 30? I'll have to do my research. I don't care about that anymore. It's in the past. It's not even in the rearview mirror anymore. And it's a really nice change of pace. And it's just so refreshing to see not just myself, because I thought it might have just been me, but an entire city rejuvenated by the fact that they don't have to hide their fandom anymore for just what was a horrible organization. So that's my 2 cents. That's your On the Clock. Guys, I really appreciate you checking this out. Downloads again have picked up, knowing that I was going to start this episode and start the new year with also reaching out to YouTube. So check that out. It is not a simulcast. You won't see me. It's just this same show, but now it's just through a different avenue that you can catch me. So again, you need to reach me. It's podcastinregulation@gmail.com, the Twitter handle and the Instagram handle @podinregulation. And you can always stop by to check out my pics on the Facebook fan page, Podcast in Regulation. Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Happy New Year. Again, my name's RP. We'll see you next week when we recap and get into the nitty-gritty of how these picks went. Guys, take care.